Okay, I'm back. Um, I think I have eliminated the need for you to have to look at me. I want us to continue our discussion of the second industrial revolution. So this is taking up with where the last video left off. There were some changes with how things were done with communications in the 19th century. There was the invention of the telegraph that enabled people to send messages by using a code. You maybe have heard of SOS before, dot, 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 dash, 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 dot, dot, dot. That's the telegraph. And one of the things this enabled people to do is to communicate almost instantly, at least comparatively speaking, with the way things have been done before. They even had the ability to lay a cable from Canada to Ireland in the middle of the 19th century so that Europe and the Americas could be linked together by telegraphs. Some other inventions, the telephone came about in the 1870s. In the late 1800s, the wireless telegraph or the radio was invented. So you have various ways now that people can communicate and transmit information, which of course is important in a business sense because time is money. Communications can make all the difference in the world. You also see corporations in the 19th century really kind of reach their own potential. The era of big business is what this is sometimes called. Corporations are able to be created because people can own shares of stock, part ownership in the company, and these can be passed on to the next generation. So corporations really have unlimited life. They got so powerful in the 19th century that some of these corporations actually became monopolies in certain markets. For instance, Carnegie controlled the steel production in the United States. Rockefeller controlled the oil refining process. So these men became fantastically wealthy. Carnegie was so wealthy that even though he tried to give away all of his wealth, all of his money, he wasn't able to do so. He established lots of schools, lots of libraries, lots of philanthropic projects, but he was unable to give it away. So that's the type of money we're talking about. Carnegie was the first billionaire. His company was the first $1 billion company. Um, some of these guys were called robber barons because they basically controlled things to the place where they almost were like kings. So a lot of people have problems with them, but they were very wealthy and they definitely were the engines that were driving industrial and business activities in the 19th century. With medicine, some advancements were made with understanding of how diseases are spread. Louis Pasteur, with his idea of germ theory, the idea that these microscopic organisms cause disease, he is the first person to identify the virus that causes rabies and invented a vaccine. He also is associated with the concept of pasteurization, heating milk to a point where it kills the bacteria in the milk and makes it safer to drink. Some other discoveries, Koch with tuberculosis, discovering what the agent that causes that. You see improvements in hospitals and nursing care. Florence Nightingale is associated with this. And Joseph Lister with his development of the first antiseptic, the first thing that actually kills germs. Listerine is named after him. It's not listed in the notes, but they also developed anesthetics in this time period, ways of putting a person to sleep so that they could do surgery and the person could survive it. Urbanization is going strong in this time period. Of course, people are moving to cities because of factories. They weren't really so concerned in the 17th and early 18th centuries with how cities looked. But by the middle of this time period, they started to want to make cities look better. They started to develop parks and deliberately try to make cities beautiful places. You see the development of public transportation with trolleys and subways. They start to put lighting on streets, which not only makes them safer, but it also enables people to do things longer into the evening. So people's days began to be filled with more than just work during daylight hours. They introduced police forces, believe it or not, for the first time in the 19th century. They started building sewage systems and actually organizing garbage pickup. Remember, cities are getting much larger than what they had been before, and they never really had to deal with these kinds of problems. Also, too, with a commercial culture that encourages people to buy new things, there was a lot more garbage in this time period. They also started to build buildings much taller because land was at a premium. So this new steel production led to larger buildings that were called skyscrapers. And many people in cities did not live in individual homes. They lived in apartment buildings. The term is tenement. These were often multiple stories high, and they weren't always the nicest places to live. So people were kind of packed into them. There were lots of problems with this. There's a section you're reading with Jacob Riis called How the Other Half Lives. And a lot of his photographs that he took were people living in tenements. You also see labor unions developing in the 19th century. They're coming to their own. Labor unions are organizations of workers that fight for improved wages and improved working conditions. It was something that took most of the 19th century and into the 20th century for them to achieve. But finally, they got things like the right to strike, the right to have living wages, the right to have safety protocols in place, the right to have an 8-hour workday. So, you know, they really worked to improve the lives of many, many people. You also see women's rights beginning to become more of a political force in this time period. Women were involved with lots of reform movements. The two that they really are associated with are the temperance movement, which was the push to abolish or limit the use of alcohol. Ultimately, this led to a period in our history in the 1900s called Prohibition. The 18th Amendment to the Constitution forbade the consumption and sale of alcohol. So these people were successful with that. And with the suffrage movement, the idea of women being able to participate politically, you start to see women like Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, and Sojourner Truth pushing for women to have these rights. In the United States, individual states granted women the right to vote first, like Wyoming. But then by 1920, with the passage of the 19th Amendment, women did receive the right to vote in the United States. So I'm going to wrap things up then with this video. Let's see here. I may have to pull this up so that I lied to you. Let's see here. All right. So let's see. I don't know how this is going. Okay. So I'm going to stop the video then, and hopefully we'll be able to finish things up with the next video. Okay.